And a big welcome into the 3 a.m. Coney podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Today, we're joined by AllBengals reporter Russ Heltman, who is going to discuss training camp with us. And we're going to have to go negative because we've been very positive on this show. So if you're looking for only optimism, which is what this show has been, it won't be in this episode. I'm sure we'll fit in optimism somewhere, Russ. But today's show is going to be about what fans don't like to talk about this time of year, which is the concerns of the Cincinnati Bengals, which is the concerns of training camp. And we've already had a major concern, Russ, with Joe Burrow's appendectomy. The update today, Joe Burrow back in the building again, walking around, doesn't have the IV, whatever, I don't know the official medical term, in his arm today. So I guess that's a positive update for Joe Burrow. But that's where I want to start the show right off the top with you, buddy. There is a time to worry about Joe Burrow and his injury and it's not a time to worry about him playing week one, but there is a time to worry about how much this affects the Cincinnati Bengals as a unit, as a team, as a group of guys moving forward into week one and into the season. There's no other circumstance you would say that missing your starting quarterback for half a training camp is a good circumstance. So when do we start to worry that Joe Burrow's absence affects the Cincinnati Bengals and their results this season?
I think you and I were kind of batting this round this morning. Glad to be on 3 a.m. Coney once again. Love coming on the show. And I believe it's called a peripherally inserted central catheter, or a PICC line, that Joe Burrow had in his arm at practice the other day. I'd never actually heard of that until the franchise quarterback was wearing it there on his golf cart. I think August 12th is when I'm going to start getting actually concerned for the entire scope of the team this season. If Joe Burrow is not back after that game, the first preseason game of the year for the Cincinnati Bengals, if he's not back on the practice field after that, then it's time, I think, to start worrying just a little bit, because that'll have been well over 2 weeks since the surgery. It's an appendectomy. From what we know, HIPAA laws don't want to violate any of that. Nobody trying to give up too much information. That's a non-intense surgery for the most part, usually. Now, we don't know exactly if there was complications, whatever. If something happens, who knows? Maybe that's the reason why he was limping around, walking a little gingerly, even though it was still a few days after the surgery a couple days ago. But regardless, this should be something that by August 12th, the day after, 2 days after, whenever they get back on the practice field in the middle of August, if he's not out there still because of this injury or this surgery, then I think that's when you start to worry. Not necessarily for Joe Burrow, because I think the guy has not had a single normal offseason, and he's already in tier one of Mike Sandel of the athletic quarterback tiers. Like, he has yet to really go through anything normal in his NFL career, and I think he's, as you and I have talked about, he's already, in my eyes, gotten a lot of the install worked out, gotten some chemistry hammered out with some of his new offensive linemen, one of which, Lyle Collins, wouldn't even be able to play with him right now because he's dealing with the back injury in his own right. So the fact that Joe Burrow brings that type of take initiative mentality to the sport of football, to his craft, he takes it so seriously, I think that gives everybody a little bit deeper sigh of relief. But all in all, practice is what makes perfect. It's this cliche for a reason. You have to get out there and practice with your teammates, especially when they are remaking this entire offensive line, except for that left tackle spot.
And especially, Russ, I think the more important point is that this entire offseason was designed around a fully healthy, fully focused, fully intense training camp. Zach shortened down the offseason program, less of an offseason program than any other team, to make sure that training camp was a full ramp-up, to make sure that training camp was this intense, we're ready for the season, building this thing brick by brick. Joe Burrow even said in a press conference in the summer, the last one that we've heard him speak in, it's go time. And we haven't seen him go at all. And I just think that if this team had lost in the AFC divisional round and this same storyline were happening in camp, I guarantee there'd be a lot more panic going on. I think that there's still a Super Bowl haze over the fan base, over the media, over the team. Oh, it's just Joe Burrow. My concern isn't about Joe. It is about everybody else on the football team. Everybody else on the team that has to reach a maximum level to perform. Because I do not think that this is a roster littered with all pros. It is a roster littered with very good players who, when they are 100% of whoever they can become, which Joe Burrow has a tendency to bring out of people, if they're 100% of that, they can win the Super Bowl. But it is not this, it's not Aaron Donald and Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward. And like Cheetah Awuzie is very good. Is he elite Hall of Famer? I don't know. Right? Mike Hilton is very, very good. One of the best slot corners in the league. But he's not this elite, no doubt talent. There's a lot to say about chemistry, consistency, the ability to elevate talent around you. That makes Tom Brady so important. That we have said makes Joe Burrow so important. So him not being on the practice field, players already saying that him just being on the golf cart upped the intensity in practice. I don't like to hear that. I don't like to hear that at all because he's not out there every day. They're not practicing with him. So what are the Bengals not getting out of these crucial weeks of camp that they otherwise would be getting out of it? And this is not a big deal to everybody, but if Mike Tomlin walks in and slaps the Bengals in the face when they're trying to celebrate an AFC championship, I guarantee people will be talking about the 3 weeks that Joe Burrow, or 2-3 weeks, whatever it ends up being, that Joe Burrow missed because of this appendectomy.
Right, and I think the key point you made there is a rising tide kind of lifts all boats in a situation like Joe Burrow's, where he is a top 5, top 6 quarterback in the NFL. I think it's pretty inarguable at this point, 2 years into his career. And the bottom line is you can't get that same level of fine-tuning, sharpening the edges that you're getting with Joe Burrow as opposed to what they have right now in Brandon Allen. Brandon Allen is maybe a top half of the league backup quarterback. You could most likely argue a bottom 10 backup quarterback in the NFL in terms of pure talent. They love what he brings leadership-wise. They love what he brings chemistry-wise with Joe Burrow. But nobody's walking into a room with Brandon Allen or a game with Brandon Allen or a practice with Brandon Allen, no offense, thinking they're getting top-tier quarterback play at a National Football League level. So that's the biggest question mark surrounding this camp for me. It's like, what should I really actually be reading into besides Jamar Chase dominating every single day at camp, which has been the best news so far? 0 drop issues. It looks like Jamar going to go into year 2 in a similar trajectory to his former LSU teammate Justin Jefferson and light up his second season just like JJ did last year for the Minnesota Vikings. So outside of that, like Kwame Lassiter, sure, he looks good, but how good is he looking? How good will he look with Joe Burrow?
Well, and I think a huge part of that is Trenton Irwin is struggling during camp. Trenton Irwin was one of those guys that he worked so well with Joe that it kind of elevated his performance and it made him look better than the other wide receivers because Trenton Irwin is using a lot more brains than he is athleticism out on the football field. So, I think Hayden Hurst,
I was just about to bring him up.
He's not really getting the true Joe Burrow experience early in camp. And again, will it affect week 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? God, no. No, it shouldn't. No way. Will it affect week 1? I think you and I would be insane to sit here and say Joe Burrow missing the first X number of weeks of camp will have no effect on the Bengals' performance week 1. That's insane. We wouldn't be like that. There are so many factors that go into this, and kudos to the Bengals and kudos to everybody that covers them for not over freaking out, because I think that there's a proper amount of weight. It's just an appendectomy. It's Joe Burrow. He's there in the meetings. It's not going to be that bad. But I feel like it's almost gone in reverse to where we're all like, oh, it's totally not a problem whatsoever. Zero concern. For me, I think, Russ, it reminded me that shit happens in this sport. And it can go off the rails at any time. And you better not get too comfortable. Because today was the first day, because, normal appendectomy, I've kind of been expecting Joe Burrow to be tough guy and walk out there. And then I see an IV in his arm, and you see him walking around. You're like, oh, this is not what I expected. Today was the first day, Russ, that I felt football nervous since we beat the Raiders in that playoff game, honestly, where I'm like, oh, this could go wrong. Oh, things could happen that go against the Bengals. And I think that's an important place to come to as a fan, as an organization, as everything. I don't think we would have got there until they lost a game. So maybe there's the positivity and all that, is that there's some reality dropped into the Bengals bucket from this appendectomy, from Joe Burrow, your biggest player, your leader, missing that much of camp, that there's a drop of, we better be buttoned up because this thing is coming. And I'm hoping it goes that way other than, apathy or not caring because Joe's not there or all those things that could happen to the Bengals in this training camp. I want to pivot, Russ. We're 10 minutes of the show. I want to pivot specifically to non-Joe Burrow concerns because I think that it's probably going to be okay. And I don't think Joe's performance is going to be affected, but I just think that we should have a little more concern than we're having. But in terms of actual football concerns, let's pretend Joe Burrow's great. There wasn't that much effect on the chemistry of the team. What is the biggest concern you have for the Cincinnati Bengals? What'd be the one thing you circled? They went 9-8 and missed the playoffs. Oh God, this happened.
It's Lyle Collins to me right now. He is the biggest concern in my eye for this entire team. They need 4 of those 5 spots to be anchored, firm, top 15 level offensive line play at every single spot. I would say you expect that, except for whoever ends up winning that left guard spot between Jackson Carman, who is the definitive leader in the clubhouse, I would say right now. He would have to make some serious mistakes, play pretty poorly in the preseason in my eyes for the rookie Cordell Volson to end up taking that spot. And when you look at Lyle Collins, there's a reason, people, that he went and signed with the Bengals and had all those play bonuses added into his contract, was signed for what many believe to be a bargain deal by Cincinnati. It's because of those lower body injuries, and specifically that hip that was just really, really finicky on him for years in Dallas. Some Cowboys reporters have mentioned that he dealt with non-disclosed back injuries throughout his time in Dallas. And when you're thinking about a guy 300 plus pounds playing right tackle, being that big of a body, and we start talking about back injuries that as of right now, he is still day-to-day, has not practiced yet with the team, has not dressed at all in this training camp. I get where Zach Taylor is kind of not feeding the fires, taking it with a grain of salt, saying we expect him to be ready day one. And there were
what else is he going to do?
Right, yeah. There were reports that said that Lyle Collins, if there were a game today, for example, on Thursday, August 4th, he would be able to play in that. Say they were kicking off the season a week early and doing the NFL kickoff game. But I want my offensive line, if I'm Zach Taylor, you want them to be as close to 100% healthy going into the season, because as it is, you're already going up against the gods of luck, quote unquote, to have another lucky injury season. And so far, the injury luck has not been on their side. Great to see Alex Kappa come back. I don't see that as being a lingering issue, core muscle deal. That's something that you'd think heals pretty well, and you don't have to worry about it being a nagging type of thing like a back or a hamstring, something like that. But to me, the number one concern for me on this team is that right tackle position, and it being unstable, completely collapsing this entire plan the Bengals had from going 25th to 28th ranked offensive line in the NFL to 12th to 15th, a ceiling of top 10 offensive line in the NFL.
Yeah, I share that concern, and I think that there are some injury-prone guys, and we are literally 2 pulled hamstrings from it being Deontay Smith, Cordell Volson, Ted Karras, Alex Kappa, and Isaiah Prince across the front 5, which I'm not signing up for that. I don't think it'd be great. But we watched this team make the Super Bowl with a bad offensive line, and we know that the offense can still find big plays. It's not ideal, but will it actually kill this team if they end up with the 22nd ranked offensive line? I don't think so. But I think there's one game we look back in the past, and I'm going to combine a positional concern with a narrative concern, which I got criticized. Not really criticized. I argument with a Twitter bot, and they were like, oh, you only talk narratives. I said, well, all the players and athletes talk narratives when you interview them, so maybe they're a little more important than you want to let on. But the secondary, when we look back to last year, what was the one game, Russ, if you were to circle one on the schedule, where the Bengals were really feeling themselves before they should have been? What was the one game? And they absolutely laid on their face.
Was it San Fran? Was that the game?
No, not San Fran. The Jets.
The Jets, right. Mike White. The Mike White game. Yep.
You're feeling yourself. You're 5-2. Oh, we're hot. Oh, we're great. We're the 1 seed in the AFC. We got Mike White, this dork, coming in here. And this is what Sean McVay said it on the sideline of the Super Bowl. God damn, these guys play hard. That is the number one attribute of the Bengals defense. It's not talent. It is they play their ass off. There's no loafing. There is absolute insanity drilling down onto every offense at every position. It is That's where they created success last year, is because they played so hard. They're a roster of pretty good to very good players with a few average mixed in that plays really hard, and they've got a creative defensive coordinator. That's what the Bengals defense is. And to me, the Jets game was an example of what happens when they don't play hard. What happens if they get a little apathetic? What happens if they start, floating on airs, as one would say? Mike White drops 406 yards and you lose 34-31 to the New York Jets with Elijah Moore as being the best wide receiver on the field.
And it wasn't like Mike White was out there dropping like haymaker bombs from 60 yards down the field and dropping them in to the breadbasket. It was almost all yards after catch, sloppy tackling, stuff like that, miscommunication.
Yeah, and to me, the biggest concern is Dax Hill and Cam Taylor-Britt aren't exactly ready. Eli Apple wasn't that good to begin with. And they're a little more apathetic in a lot of games this year because they believe they're the hottest thing on this side of the AFC. They believe they are that team now. And so I think that not saying that concern would also be foolish on our end, because there's a universe where we're 6 weeks into the season, and God, why can't these guys cover anybody? Jesse Bates holds out to week 1. Why can't they cover anybody? Because there were certainly times last year, if the defensive line didn't apply pressure, this back-end secondary was not good enough to cover some of the elite wide receivers in the league. What did we talk about in the Tennessee Titans game? Oh, my God, A.J. Brown's going to kill us. Oh, Tyreek Hill's – and they played their butt off down the stretch in the playoffs. But I've heard the word Super Bowl way too much from this team. Way too much. And I know that it's going to be front and center because you just made the thing, and I know that that's the stated goal of the organization. But it's starting to change over the last couple of days as we get into camp. But this thing's got to be brick by brick, because if you think that you're playing for the Super Bowl when you play the equivalent of the Jets in a week 3, or I think they actually play the Jets in week 3, when you play that team, if you're thinking about the Super Bowl, how are we going to beat the Chiefs? I don't think this team is elite enough on the back end of the secondary, elite enough on the defensive side of the ball to get away with that stuff. So that's my biggest concern, is that this defense, because of the way they performed in the playoffs and because of the way we saw them perform at times last year, if they are here in terms of their headspace when they really should be down here, and they lose that little bit of grind and effort they had last year, that it's a defense that could stay middle of the pack or even regress to the 21st, 22nd defense. And I think that's a realistic scenario that's 1 or 2 injuries away. I think Larry Ogunjobi is somebody that should have been brought back to add that 3-technique pass rusher. I think they should have added another veteran defensive back in free agency. I think that there's a lot of risk there on the back end of the Bengals defense. If let's say Trey Hendrickson has an off year, he's not getting to the passer that much. This pass rush falls to league average to below league average real quick. And now all of a sudden, Chidobe Awuzie has got to become one of the best corners in the league because he's guarding guys for 4 to 5 seconds. I think that they're in a tenable position, that defense, and I worry about their mindset moving into the season. Although, again, we're doing a concerns podcast, so I'm being negative. I want to state that as well.
Right. And I think I would tend to lean towards your latter concern there than your former concern when we were looking at this defense. I am more concerned about a 3-year regression from Trey Hendrickson. He has been, over the last 3 years, top 3 in the NFL in sack production. Top 5 edge rusher in the league over the last 3 football seasons. He has been a menace, and he was largely their main pressure creator throughout the entire season, at least their only consistent pressure creator. Sure, Sam Hubbard would show flashes here or there, but he's more well adept on the run defense, while Trey Hendrickson a little bit less adept in the run stopping and more capable of taking down the quarterback. But your number one thing you brought up there for me, and my biggest concern defensively, is that 3-technique spot. Who is going to emerge? Can B.J. Hill live up to that new deal he just got? Can he give them even more production on a similar type of snap diet or an even increased snap diet? And can they get anything out of the other young defensive linemen on this roster? Can they find a diamond in the rough that they develop? It's been a long time, Lucas, since they've developed an interior defensive lineman on this franchise.
I think they've got a couple maybe, and that's my hope for the defense. Let's go positive for a minute, Russ. Let's go positive. Right? My hope, and actually what I'm thinking is going to happen, is that my big concerns that there's not enough elite talent, I think the Bengals nailed this draft. I think
Huge.
they nailed it.
Zachary
I think
Carter.
they nailed it. And I think that because the Bengals were just in the Super Bowl, there was a level of expectation from these already high character guys, which after the disaster of Jackson Carman sitting on the bench while you got Hakeem Adeniji getting run over all Super Bowl, didn't play a snap. It's to draft Jackson Carman in the second round and for the season to end like that and him not even see the field, and it was because of his immaturity. That was the one draft pick they made that wasn't a high character guy. And we've seen that with the stories that have come out. And Mike Brown's admitted, we knew that he was that. We knew he had that in his past. We knew he was immature. That was their one failure. I don't think they made any of those failures this year. This is a group of highly mature, high character guys. They maybe even overdrafted for character. But I think Jeff Gunter and Zach Carter and Dax Hill and Cam Taylor-Britt and Cordell Volson, I really am excited for all those guys more than I've been excited about third, fourth, fifth round rookies from years past. And if they somehow had a Seattle Legion of Boom type draft where you're like, where the hell did they get two elite interior edge rushers and an elite cover corner and a versatile safety? Where did they get those guys from? Oh, the second, third, fourth, fifth round and the back end of the first because a guy fell because he's a safety. That's the formula for where, now they're a top 5 defense. And now they're going to win 15 to 17 games, even if the offensive line has some injuries and falters and is down in the lower 18s, 19s, because as long as Joe Burrow's not sacked 70 times, then if the defense is top 10, I don't think that Joe Burrow or any quarterback of his level, Russ, will ever not make the playoffs with a top 10 defense.
Yeah,
I mean, even Justin Herbert.
It's like Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, the same tropes where it's like if the last time this guy got a top 10 defense, he had this much. Yeah, I guess exactly.
Yeah, and so I think if those draft picks hit, and you can have a seriously impactful rookie in Dax Hill and guys that provide athletic upside and can fill roles in Jeff Gunter and Zach Carter, and Cam Taylor-Britt, if that happens, now you're talking about this defense can be top 10. And my biggest concern completely goes away, and it actually turns into organizational strength. It makes it so that you can pay T. Higgins and Jamar Chase at the same time. You can do so much more with this offense. You can keep doing what Joe Burrow wants them to do, which is continuously sign veteran offensive linemen. There's no reason to ever have Joe Burrow try to teach a rookie anymore. I mean, it's not worked out. They would be amazing if the Bengals could have this stock-loaded defense out of the draft and then just replace veteran offensive linemen. Because you're going to have too much money in the quarterback and wide receiver room to then invest high-value draft capital in the front of that line. Better to be lower mid-tier free agents, some lower mid-round draft picks that develop into that role. And the Bengals like having that 50-50 split offense to defense. So if Joe Burrow and everybody's taking up that much room, you're going to need to find cheap veteran options. And I think that's the way they're moving forward. But if Cam Taylor-Britt, Dax Hill, all these guys, they suck, that's a problem. And that's a big concern for me, especially if Eli Apple regresses. Trey Hendrickson, as you said, regresses to the mean. Logan Wilson played with his hair on fire at the end of last year. Was he that the entire season? Not necessarily. I mean, Jermaine Pratt really elevated late in the year. Can he be that again? So I think that those are legitimate questions and concerns when it comes to the Bengals defense. I think that the conversation is misplaced when we talk about, the ringer, about where the regression is coming from. I think that the regression, if it's going to come from anywhere, is going to come from the defense, and that's solely it. It's just the defense.
I agree, because I just if you assume median health for this offense, the sky is the limit. They have an unequaled stable of weapons. No one in the NFL has a 1 through 4 top 3 wide receivers and top running back combination that comes close to even the Bengals tier, let alone eclipsing it. So when you factor in that with a potential top 10 offensive line, players at their position who can be at a minimum top 30 all the way around. So you're getting starter level production at all 5 of those offensive line spots, and a quarterback who has only ascended every single year he's played, and knock on wood, running into some issues right now in terms of screwing up his offseason, but had a full offseason. Like I mentioned, I don't know for a fact, but I am very confident that he was in conversations, discussing the game plans, discussing the playbook, discussing calls and cadences with his offensive linemen, maybe even getting together with them in early and middle July before training camp even started, because he was ready to go. He was locked in, as you mentioned. That was the last thing he said to the media in his final press conference heading out of OTAs. So the fact that, to me, there's so many questions about the Bengals offense being able to hit these ceilings, being able to not regress, being able to capitalize even more on these big plays, and also going up against a top 10 schedule difficulty in terms of Las Vegas win totals. Yeah, that's all well and good, but Bengals last year had a top 10 difficulty in schedule Vegas win totals. So, I mean, it changes every single year. Everybody has to play a decently hard schedule, and it's really going to come down to, honestly, what the quarterback matchups end up looking like, and we're not going to know that injury-wise and what players are playing and looking like until we get all the way to the end of the season and can look back and see what kind of stretches they had in terms of easy quarterback competition. But you're right. This is a huge, huge draft for this Bengals franchise. I feel like I say that every single year since they got Joe Burrow, but we could really look back at this as the shortener or extender draft. If they hit on 3 of these 5 defensive picks, and they don't have to go out in the free agency to keep that defense at a top half of the league level while you have Joe Burrow,
that's a home run.
You're extending. You might be extending the window 2-3 more years while you have Joe Burrow under contract on that first big extension, because you're going to be able to go out and get him 1 or 2 more pieces along the offensive line. So yeah, the defense and those young draft picks, those first and second year guys on the defense, a lot less second year guys, a lot more first year guys, are a huge, huge fulcrum point for this team, not only in 2022, but more so, obviously, in 23, 24, 25, just giving them flexibility like so many teams try to go get when they look for cheap talent in the draft.
Yeah, and we do say that all the time. Oh, this is one of the most important drafts, but because of the way the contracts are lining up now, it's getting kind of into, okay, doesn't have to be a perfect draft, but you got Dax Hill better be good. Dax Hill better be good.
You don't want to have to go out and sign a DJ Reader in 2 years.
They won't be able to do that.
You want to sign Chidobe Awuzie from here on out on the defense if you're adding veteran talent. Yeah. $7 to $10 million, something like that, or the equivalent percentage-wise once these cap spikes keep going up. People know what I'm talking about. But you don't want to be resetting the market on defense for any position that is not an in-house homegrown talent for the rest of the decade, I would say. You do not want to have to be doing that. You want to be either paying mid-tier guys to come fill some holes or paying these guys second deals that you just drafted in 2022.
Now, last thing I want to bring up before I get you out of here, a thought you just had pop into my head. This year is even more critical, not for the dynasty of Joe Burrow, whatever that's going to be. It's not only critical because of where the Bengals are at as a franchise and the fact that this roster is reaching a point where it can become an elite level team, a 13 to 15 win team, if they hit their ceilings, if they stay healthy. But it's also a very tumultuous offseason for what has been the most stable division in the NFL over the past 5 to 6 years. There is a lot of tenuous situations in this division this year. And if the Bengals can go and slap everybody around again, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs. And you know what's good for this division, if you're a Bengals fan? For these teams to start firing good coaches because they can't beat Joe Burrow. That's how the SEC got so bad there for a minute, because they were firing good coaches just because they couldn't beat Nick Saban. That's how the AFC East got so garbage, because they were firing good coaches because they couldn't beat Tom Brady. The Ravens just fired what I was told was a Hall of Fame defensive coordinator. I was told that all year. Hall of Fame. Put him in there. Don Wink Martindale. The Ravens let him go because he gave up 1,000 yards against Joe Burrow in 2 games. 1,000 yards in 2 games. Joe Burrow put a Santa Claus hat on and ended that guy's defensive coordinator career. So if the Bengals can hit on this and embarrass Stefanski twice, embarrass Harbaugh twice. And Greg Roman will lose his job for sure if they can't score against the Bengals this year. And if Kenny Pickett, if Mike Tomlin and the Steelers let it get out there that their scouting staff sees a lot of similarities between Kenny Pickett and Joe Burrow, and the Steelers go 5-12 this year because Kenny Pickett keeps bouncing the ball off of his offensive lineman's helmet, or it slips behind him, or he can't handle pressure in his face, if that happens, he might lose his job. So you could absolutely wreck. The Browns wrecked themselves, but you could wreck John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin standing in their own city by simply being this dominant force of a team this year. If you allow these teams to stabilize, I think the Bengals are winning this division the next 2 years. But if you allow the Ravens and the Steelers to stabilize, to maintain these systems they've had for a long time, to maintain these elite level coaches that they have, because you're not generating as much success as you should be, then the Bengals won't win the division for 6 straight years like the Chiefs did, because the Ravens and Steelers will keep coming back because they're two of the model organizations in the NFL. But you have a rare opportunity with this season. If they sweep the division, Russ, clean sweep, blow everybody out, dominate it, win this thing by week 14, I think it could throw the division into a 5 or 6 year tailspin.
It's very possible, and there's a lot of uncertainty. Not just there's a lot of turnover in the coaching staffs around the AFC North. Less so in Cleveland, but in Baltimore, like you mentioned, Don Martindale out, goes to the Giants, becomes their defensive coordinator. They bring in Mike McDonald, who Jim hired Mike McDonald from the Ravens staff to be the Michigan defensive coordinator. He gets one season with Jim, and then his brother steals him back to be the defensive coordinator. That must have been an interesting conversation at the latest family gathering for the Harbaughs. But Mike McDonald, the new defensive coordinator there, and when you look at the quarterback situations on all of these teams, the Browns, who knows when Deshaun Watson will ever take a snap in Cleveland? I can't. I'm not even confident that's going to happen with where we are in that situation.
If he does, is he going to be right here?
Right. It might have
3 years off. Like
it could. Yeah. It could. He could go 800 days without playing in an NFL game by the next time that we see Deshaun Watson on an NFL field. Not that I think he should ever be on an NFL field, but that's a completely different half-hour podcast. And then Lamar Jackson.
We can have it.
What's going on there? He's playing on the franchise tag? Is that really going to happen? He's at training camp. He says he's going to cut off contract talks, does not have an agent. It's just all very odd. It's very, very odd that we still, on Thursday, August 4th, a guy in Lamar Jackson, former MVP, next in line to get his big deal. Will he even get it? Will he even command it? I don't even think he wants to play for the Baltimore Ravens on an extended contract. I think he wants to play out year by year, keep getting the franchise tag, keep holding this team over the coals, keep making them wonder whether or not this is another Kirk Cousins situation. Are we going to have to give him a fully guaranteed contract? All of that is just amalgamated into one big snowball distraction. And then it's been my favorite thing of training camp, Lucas, just perusing the Latrobe, Pennsylvania quarterback reports every single day. We get rumblings of Mason Rudolph vying for first team snaps. We got local media personalities who can't even tell whether it's Mason Rudolph or Kenny Pickett throwing the football. It's a mess. That's all I can say it is in Steeler land right now. They have 3 quarterbacks, and that means they have 0 quarterbacks. And that's a great, great thing to hear if you're a Bengals fan who have the definitive quarterback in the division, yes. And that would be Joe Burrow.
And I think the Ravens are waiting to see if Lamar – I don't think they're waiting to see. I think there's a number that if Lamar agreed to, they would sign it. But for the deal Lamar wants, I think the Ravens are like –
Right, and if you're Lamar –
I'm going to need to see you beat Joe Burrow, Lamar. Before I give you this contract, I need you to prove that you're the best quarterback in our division. Like, and that's the thing is that Joe Burrow just scared the living piss out of the entire NFL. With what he just did last season, that is why we saw so much action in the AFC. Nobody thought they could stand still. Nobody. Because Michael Irvin said it best, and I think Michael Irvin has one of the better pulses on league circles because he still talks to everybody. When the conversation was about the Bengals O-line after the Tennessee Titans game, Michael Irvin, I love this clip. He said, are you worried about Joe Burrow? I'm worried about the NFL if they ever figure out how to block for this guy. So If they figured out, they figured out how to block for him, we really don't know what he could do. And there is a point where he does so much that each team in the division has to recalculate who they are as organizations to be able to go and beat him. I think the Steelers have already slightly made that calculation, and that's because they're in a certain quarterback situation. The Browns it's already been reported that the Cleveland Browns went after Deshaun Watson because of Joe Burrow. Like, that has already been reported. That's already been confirmed. And now, if Lamar Jackson can't beat Joe Burrow head-to-head, the Ravens are going to think real hard about signing him to a long-term contract, because if you can't beat the best quarterback in the division, then we can't pay you like you're the best quarterback in the league. And that, I think it's very advantageous. Yeah, I will pay Lamar, but at the same time, it causes complications. If you keep losing to the Bengals, it causes complications. Because that's who you got to beat. If the Bengals go 6-0 and sweep everybody, Russ, and they beat the Ravens by 20 both times again, how can you honestly, as a Ravens fan, be like, yeah, man, if we commit to 7 years of this, we're definitely going to have a lot of success. That would be very difficult for everybody to do. Even though Lamar's great, even though I would probably sign Lamar, it's just, that's what happened with Tom Brady. That's what happened with Nick Saban. That's what happened with all these legends within their own division. Look what happened to the AFC West once Patrick Mahomes started throwing. They just now figured themselves out. And those were bad organizations. So we'll see if it can happen to good organizations that exist in the AFC North. I mean, it's...
Right. And to me, I agree to an extent, but I don't know what you do if you're the Ravens. What is your plan B? You have spent 3 years formulating your entire team, your entire culture around this player. He has you by everything. All the leverage you could ever ask for is in the hands of Lamar Jackson. He doesn't need an agent. You know why? Because he has this thing on his phone called an internet browser, and you can go on SpoTrack, or you can go on overthecap.com and see, highest guaranteed dollars, Deshaun Watson. Second highest guaranteed dollars. I'm not going to get my whole contract guaranteed because that's crazy. Oh, Kyler Murray. I want $100,000 more dollars guaranteed than Kyler Murray. And that's the end of the conversation. That's the end of the conversation. Yeah. There doesn't have to be another conversation. And it's clear that the Ravens are not yet willing to meet that number. Will they be willing to do it? I think they should do it. They should have done it 2 months ago, 3 months ago. You always pay your quarterback as quickly as possible. But maybe we aren't privy to these conversations. Lamar Jackson is saying, I don't want to sign that number. I'm waiting on another quarterback to sign his deal. I'm going to play out on the franchise tag. I'll play out on 2 franchise tags. I'll get paid $40 million, $45 million on the second tag at 120% and then go out and test free agency. And if I get hurt, who cares? I'll get paid anyways because I'm Lamar Jackson. Even if I tear an ACL, somebody will still give me a massive contract. And that's just the biggest issue right now for a lot of these NFL franchises. And especially when you look at the Arizona situation, it's like a lot of them have no other choice. You've invested so much. You've tied yourself so much to these players. And when they command that amount of money, a lot of times teams just end up doing it because there's just not a lot of options otherwise.
All right, Russ. Well, I don't know what else we can dive into other than I wanted to text you this, but when did I mention the percentage tied to the cap Burrow contract? Like 2 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. Well, Mike Florio last week was talking about how he thinks Joe will be the first quarterback to take a percentage tied to the cap deal. And I'm just saying it's a good idea. I've been throwing it around Athens. I don't know, 18%, I would guess, 18. With a huge signing bonus on the front end to make sure that there's a lot of cash coming in early. There's 100 ways they could do it, but I have screened this idea in Athens, just hoping that it reverberates off of Joe Burrow Stadium and then kicks around and somehow ends up into his ear and go, you know what? A 12-year deal with 18% of the cap every year and a huge signing bonus sounds like a great way to financially secure me and guarantee that the Bengals can stay competitive for that amount of time. I think that would be a fantastic idea. Deal.
Just take the Mahomes deal, Joe. It's okay. Take the Mahomes deal. It's fine, dude. Just go ahead and take that. I think $500 million. That's the sticker tag right there. That's all you need to see.
I think Mahomes is learning that that was a bad deal on his end.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to be the 12th paid highest quarterback here in like 2 years for the length of his deal. So I don't think Joe wants that to happen, and I just think that you can name the number at the end of every year based on what the projected cap is, or not even the projected cap. You can just do the last cap, 18% of the last cap. Cap goes up a little bit, so he's a little short of 18%. There's so many ways to do that to make sure that his salary constantly increase and the Bengals have stability, and they'll just do rolling guarantees so Mike Brown doesn't have to completely go broke putting checks into
the escrow part is a great point there. Well, you don't have to slot all of that guaranteed money away, as opposed to if you do it as a percentage of the cap. Yeah.
Well, and right now, to me, a lot of NFL players with these guarantees, when they're demanding the upfront guarantees and escrow, it's a lot more about pride than actually if you're going to get the money, like the realism of actually getting the money. It's just saying, I got a guaranteed contract, and, God forbid something horrible happens to me, it's still guaranteed. But we would know, like, if you're a quarterback, it's completely different. And I don't think Joe is caring about the respect of the money. He's more worried about just making sure that he gets a fair market deal and it keeps the team competitive. So if he's worried about those two things and not the guarantees up front, he's more willing to accept more of a rolling guarantee thing to where the Bengals don't have to completely break their bank to get those guarantees. Because Joe might know that T and Jamar really want it all guaranteed or something like that. I think that there's going to be a lot of working hand in hand, and it's because the Bengals are going to tell Joe, we will pay you whatever, but we're going to be honest about our ability to be competitive around you at certain levels of compensation that you're asking for. And they've been great with the communication, and if they're upfront about it, I don't think that it'll be too much of an issue.
Right, my last point on that is, for quarterbacks, especially tier 1 quarterbacks, it's a perfect point you just mentioned there. There is basically, I can't think of one scenario outside of Joe Burrow, God forbid, getting in a car accident or getting in a close to death scenario where he can never play football again, to where that contract isn't completely paid out. So obviously that's why guys go for the guarantees, because there is always that possibility. God forbid something happens to everybody. But like you said, there is such a small percent chance of Joe Burrow not seeing the entirety of whatever that 8, 10, 12-year deal worth of money is.
But if you're a quarterback and something like that does happen to you, like an Alex Smith situation where it's this, there's no way in hell they're not giving you the money, because it's just a public relations thing. You're the hero of the city, and now you can't play football anymore, and so the Bengals strip away $300 million. That's not going to happen. No, they find a way to pay out that contract or give them a percentage of ownership or something from a PR perspective. The quarterbacks need to understand that they're going to get their money, every dollar of it. So you have to work with your organization to try to stay competitive. All right, that was the 3 a.m. Coney. That was Russ. I kept him longer than I promised to him that I'd keep him, so we're really thankful for him. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, follow Russ on Twitter. He's doing a great job with All Bengals, covering every angle of training camp. Check out some of my articles at Stripe Hype, little more columns than coverage. Russ doing a little better job on the coverage end of things, but plenty of stuff you can find from both of us and the 3 a.m. Coney, all about the Cincinnati Bengals. Subscribe, because it makes us want to do it again, and we'll see you guys next time.